And we.
So we need to make plans to go out to lunch with them.
Okay. That's your cue, Todd.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Todd Whitley, the Executive Director of the Masterwork Music and Art Foundation, and this is A Life in the Arts. Tonight, we're very happy to have John Wright with us, an illustrator who's had a long and varied career, especially in historic illustration. I just wanted to share for those of you that are new that Masterwork was founded over 50 years ago with a mission to support excellence in the arts. And today, Masterwork offers 3 different levels of arts awards. The first is a premier award, a $10,000 gift that goes out to an individual. We've had 2 to date, and community grant awards are also issued that go out to different community organizations or people who are working on community arts projects. And then competitive awards are we offer as well. Masterwork has free classes offered online, and this series, A Life in the Arts, where we like to celebrate people who've committed themselves to the arts in various ways. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to our beloved board member, Joseph White, our interviewer, and John Wright.
Okay. Well, good evening, John. Like we weren't on before, but at any rate, I wanted, so this is not what, when you talk about the arts, most people think of the more artsy fartsy stuff. But you have really a wonderful niche in that you get to bring pieces of the past to life for people. I know I remember there was for many years a wonderful program on British television called Time Team. And one of the most important people was the illustrator, because it was one thing to talk about Paleolithic people, but it's another thing to see what their lives might have been like. So now your specialty is the Revolutionary War period. And so I guess let's start by looking at some of the things that you create for people. One of the major things, I've got to pick up the next slideshow here, is that, okay, here, and let's go back here, that. And I want to do slideshow, and I want to do from the beginning. And so I'm going to share the screen again. And so a number of the pieces of work that you're sharing with us tonight are pieces that you've done for, well, in this case, I guess this is the Westchester County Historical Society, but also various parks and the National Park Service. So can you tell us something about, both how you came to, I'm sure this was a commission, but where, like, how did you research this, and how did you come across, about to make this particular scene come to life?
This scene, this is just recently been installed in September. It actually is one of 5 panels, the only artwork of mine on any of these panels, and it's in Hastings. It's not for Westchester County, it's the Hastings Historical Society.
I see.
It represents the Battle of Edgar's Lane, which was a very small battle that actually you can read about in Joseph Plum Martin, which is an account of real Revolutionary War soldier who came from Connecticut. So
Yeah.
that is a primary source that I used, and some of the historians that are associated with the Historical Association used to research this. And uh, so it took about a year's worth of work, collaborating with several people and doing the research on my own, to figure out what the uniforms were. As you can see on the top, my work is all across the bottom. There's another painting, which is done by a Connecticut artist, Don Triani, who's very, very well known. And he does a terrific amount of research often too. And I had that painting to work with. So in some regard, I already had a lot of my work done for me.
Mm.
And, uh, and it's a case of making sketches, showing it to them, getting them to make the changes that they're looking for, to agree to, and then to do the work. This actually was a piece that I had to make a major change in, which, because I saw your list of questions, I know is one of what you may ask. And I wound up changing out all of the primary trees at their request, because originally I was making a very stylized tree, and they decided that, well, they liked the idea originally. They asked me to go more realistic, and which I did, and I got paid extra for.
Okay.
So they were very good people to work with.
Okay. And no, I can see that also that represents the time of year.
That's
Uh,
right. This took place the last day of September in 1778, and it is right on the battlefield today,
mm,
which is now a small park and a bus stop.
okay. I'm going to head on to the next one here. Yeah, the first few that we're in the series we're doing are there's a bunch of maps, and but and we'll get to some other kinds of illustration later. But here's a town I know well. Going, I used to work just up the street, just north of Eastchester on off of 22.
Well, I just live about half an inch off the bottom of the screen.
Mm.
So, and this was a very recent one also for the historic Eastchester Historical Society. It's a funny thing. I have to give credit to my wife, because several years ago she said, start doing bird's eye views, because you gotta have a good bird's eye view technique. And that seems to be illustrations that few people are doing. And so I get quite a few jobs doing exactly that.
Mm. And now, so this is a whole different kind of illustration here.
Yes, it is. Yeah, but this is for New York State, Fort Montgomery, which is on the west side of the Hudson River, hard up against the Bear Mountain Bridge. It was attacked by the British and captured in 1777. The screaming 8-year-old that you see in front is the son of the regimental surgeon, the fella on the right-hand side with the red box in his arm. And they both were able to escape the capture of the fort. The kid actually climbs down something like 180-foot rock face of the Hudson Highland Mountains, and swims out into the Hudson River, where he's picked up by a boat so that he's not captured by the British. It's used as a sign, and along a trail in the ruins of the fort, which is now a state park.
Mm. They know you can. It's really the expression on the child's face is transfixing.
Uh, it's the site director's son, and
Okay.
he was, we dressed him up, and he played the role really nicely.
Mm. Okay, well, moving along here. Okay, and then again, we've got a bird's eye view here.
Yeah.
Um, now,
This is for the national parks. It was done on speculation. Their fort in Rome, New York, it's Fort Stanwix. At the time, I believe it was called Fort Schuyler during the Revolution,
mhm.
but it's still known today as Fort Stanwix. That's the name it had at the time of the French and Indian War when it was built. And it's a gorgeous fort to visit. They have excellent programs, and it was the standard Vauban style of fort where it's dug into the ground so that cannonballs would go over the top and not knock walls down. It
Mhm.
was laid to siege, as you can see in the ledger, from the 3rd to the 23rd of August in 1777. And it's one of my favorites.
Mm. The okay. Well, now this is something completely different, as Monty Python would say.
Exactly. Well, I wanted to be sure that everybody knows that I can do more than just the French and Indian or Revolutionary War.
Mm.
Uh, when I got out of art school, uh, almost immediately I wound up as the assistant art director at Field and Stream magazine.
Ah,
So it's
okay.
the case of, well, my expertise is in 18th century history. I can illustrate pretty much anything.
Well, I was going to say again, you do really good fish.
Well, I've seen a lot. One of
Mm.
my primary hobbies is fly fishing for trout, none of
Mhm.
which are in the picture.
Oh well.
This is actually actually I did this for the national parks. Uh, it is a representation of the food chain of the Hutchinson River, which is here in Westchester County. The church in the upper left-hand corner is in fact the historic church that I still work at as a historical interpreter for NPS. And the fella fishing from the boat represents a runaway slave who in the 1840s was the church's gravedigger. And he is obviously the very top of the food chain.
Yeah, there you go. I also noticed the snapping turtle down in the bottom. We have a walking trail in near us, and there are some swampland around it. And every once in a while, one of those guys crawls out of the thing, and I find myself having to shoo children away
Mm,
because it's the most interesting looking thing, but you really don't want to get too close.
no, you don't.
Lose fingers that way.
You could.
And now, so this is a this is a Wyandot, or and also says Huron warrior, um, and 1758. So we're talking 7 Years' War then.
Correct.
Yeah,
Well, that's the French and Indian War.
yeah.
Uh, we call it the French and Indian War. Europeans call it the 7 Years' War.
Yes.
So, and this was done actually as a portrait of a individual reenactor. So I relied on his uh, sourcing it out, and of course I have to make it look like him and put it in a believable pose. But we also used it for the cover of a historical organization's newsletter, the Brigade of the American Revolution. Uh,
Mm.
So, yeah, but the information is there. You know, the unlucky settler's scalp, the clubfoot musket, and ball, axe, or war club that he's using in his right hand.
Yeah, not something that one of the colonial settlers would want to be running into.
Oh, this is actually a picture of trick or treating last night before it rained.
There's that too. Okay. All right. And we'll see another. And I love this guy's expression. You know, you don't need any further information about him other than just to look at his pose and his expression. But so this would be, I'm assuming this is a British soldier,
Correct.
1775 vintage. So 10th Regiment of Foot.
Yeah, the Lincolnshires, yes.
Okay.
This was part of a illustration assignment that I did for Stony Point Battlefield, which is a New York State historic site. And in fact, it was reproduced almost life size, and it's among many others on one of the walls of their museum.
Mm.
Oh no, actually, no, I take that back. The pose and another regiment was used
Okay.
for them. I loved the pose so much that I redid the piece,
Okay.
so that, but in a different regiment, so
Okay.
that I would not be swiping their artwork.
Right.
You know, so, but it is the Lincolnshire Regiment, and historically, that's what they would have looked like. They had yellow facings with a particular lace around each buttonhole, and that's how you would be able to tell the difference between the various British regiments. You know, the buttons would have a number 10 on them.
Hmm. Okay. I'm going to move on. And this is a whole different, this is working in 3 dimensions.
Correct. I also build dioramas. This was for the old Bedford Village in Bedford, Pennsylvania. It represents the Indian village that was there about 8,000 years ago, pre-contact. And it was Shawnee, if
Mhm.
I remember correct. They would built palisades around their wigwams, and they outside of, because this is only a detail of the diorama, but in the upper left corner, you can see a pumpkin patch,
Mhm.
which was among many of the vegetables that they would have grown, corn, beans, and squash in particular. Obviously, they hunted. You can see women are scraping flesh off of hides, and you know, and so it would tell a story of the Native American Indian site that was in this spot before they built the museum village that is there now.
Mhm.
And you know, I've done dioramas for the national parks and the Tuckahoe Eastchester Historical Association, and and a few others.
Well, it's, and again, it's just another way to, uh, take the abstract stories and give them reality.
Well, that's the thing that we're really looking to do. You know, when I'm doing the artwork, I keep in mind that I am creating an image for somebody to see uh, with the information that they are being taught uh, of, of what a bygone period would have looked like, or very likely would have looked like.
You're right, as best we can tell.
That's it.
8,000 years ago, that's, I guess that has to be what you call a good guess if you're going that far back. But yeah.
Well, they actually gave me the archaeological findings. They did digs and uh, they found char posts in the circle uh, so that they knew how large the camp was. And, so that was the kind of details that they would have given me. We figured out what the dress would have been like, the habitat structures that they used. And, and you can't see in this, but the diorama is larger. You would see the no, it's I forget the name of the river that runs by, but the river that was their water source,
Mm.
with the cliffs nearby that you could still see. So it was a nice piece.
Yeah. All right. And so, and for yet a different kind of artwork, I I was particularly taken with this piece. I just, again, that's, you look at the face and the expression, and you know a lot about the person.
Well, in truth, it's the author's 8-year-old son that we
Okay.
dressed up and put him in the floor. This was the floor of the Thomas Payne Cottage, where I was the director several years ago, and posed him out. He represents a family that lived in Westchester and is hiding from the British as they were marching along the way, the post road to White Plains prior to the Battle of White Plains.
Mm.
And the funny thing is that this family is still in existence, and a distant cousin was a student at uh, uh, I think it was at Pace University, and she volunteered at the Thomas Payne Cottage at the time.
Mm.
But she is in, because they have the family tree in the back of the book. She is actually listed in the book as because the family is still in existence. The
Right.
whole deal was the little boy is hiding from the British because he steals back into the house as the area is being occupied, because he had forgotten his father's or his grandfather's pocket watch, left it
Mm.
behind, and didn't want it to be discovered and stolen by the British. And
Right.
so he sneaks back into the house, of course, just as they break into the house and they start robbing it of food and drink and valuables. It has a happy ending.
Okay. All right. And
Uh,
yeah.
this, I had a young guy pose this. Again, it's pretty accurate. The idea of it is Valley Forge,
Mm.
and or cold winter's duty. He is on guard. Uh, he wears a what's called a Canadian hat and a capote or Canadian blanket coat to try to stay warm. And he's obviously struggling to stay warm.
Well, I was going to say that having that coat, he is one of the fortunate ones.
Oh,
Um,
definitely.
Having, you were mentioning Mr. Plum Martin before, and that is a harrowing book
Yes.
to read. It gives you a tremendous appreciation of what the folks who bought us this country had to do that. Um, it's a wonderful. We have it down in Milford. We actually have the house that he would have studied with the local minister in. is still there, and the Historical Society is trying to restore it and raise money for that. And I think this is our last one, but so this is another book cover, it looks like.
Yes, this is for the National Park Service. And we go back to Fort Stanwix and the siege. And these are the actual uniforms that the troops that were stationed in the fort would have worn, and the correct cannon. Actually, with their help, their research, I was able to go to the fort, uh, see the place where this scene actually took place, so that I guess it doesn't make a big difference, but you know, to the depth of authenticity that we go to, this was the correct bastion from which these few cannon shots that they fired at that particular moment, they fired from. Uh, so as we said earlier, we're working at giving the public, you know, and especially children, uh, a view of what it might have looked like. And so we really do our best to make a correct impression.
Well, and you were saying that you weren't sure that all of that detail actually matters, but it actually does, because if it's real for you, then you can make it real for us.
Well put.
Anyway, so what I would like to do now is ask anybody who's attending, excuse me, if they have any questions that they'd like to ask John. Now, if you want to do that, excuse me, if you can if you could simply indicate who'd like to do that in the chat, I can turn on your sound. Well, I'm going to allow Eileen to talk.
Yes, hello, can everybody hear me? I think so. So, John, thanks for being here. And two questions. One is, have you ever done any illustrations on Benedict Arnold, who was a hero of the Battle of Ridgefield in 1777 before being a traitor to our country? And also, the second question is, who's the most fascinating character you ever illustrated?
Huh. Well, no, I've never done an illustration of Benedict Arnold. And the most fascinating historical person, I don't have a most fascinating historical person, I suspect. Each job that I do, when I am promised a job, that becomes my most fascinating historical person that I do, until it's finished, and then I get an assignment for another one. But
Okay.
I don't think I have an individual who stands out in my mind that that I have a special affinity for.
Hold on, I'm gonna,
Thank
somebody
you.
said, okay, hold on. So
Sure.
Alice asks, how did your career in illustrating something so specific evolve?
I guess I was always interested in history. It it developed when I was in art school. Not that I was aware of it, and I know this answers one of the questions that you fellas gave me previously, so I'll put them both together. But I was always interested in history. I would be reading novels like Hornblower and other great historical pieces. Last of the Mohegans and things like that. And it would show up in my artwork and my art assignments at Parsons School of Design when it could answer an assignment. And the funny thing is that some of my fellow students mentioned, and it's only a couple years ago when we got back in touch with each other, mentioned that they could see back then that I had this thing for history. Where it really went was shortly after I got out of school. I think I mentioned I went to work at Field and Stream magazine as their assistant art director, which is definitely not historical. But at that time, I also wound up joining a living history society that recreated the Revolutionary War. I figured that being an illustrator with the bicentennial in 1976 coming up, that there was going to be a lot of work for historical Revolutionary War illustrations, because obviously there are no photographs of it. And I wound up going to several of these shows, and it was like, this is really pretty interesting. I mean, I love to camp. Here's an opportunity to camp. I was a shooter, and it was interesting. I'm firing, single fire black powder muskets as opposed to semi-automatic weapons, and it just became very interesting. I wound up joining, and it was the jumping point for a huge wealth of information, because now here's hundreds of individuals who are out studying the time period, trying to come up with a better knowledge of the Revolution and the 18th century in general than what we had prior to that time. So I guess that's how it got started.
Well, and you're
The
still
rest
doing
is
that.
history.
And you're still doing the work. You showed me a picture before. You might. This is not high tech, folks. He's going to hold up a picture for us to look at in the camera of you still working as a reenactor. And back it off just a bit. There we go. Perfect. And if you see the guy with the sword,
We don't see it.
hold on. Oh,
Don't see
you
it.
don't see it in his image?
Mm-mm.
Uh-oh. Well, you know what then? I can see it from here, but oh well. Sorry, folks, that didn't work. Like I said, not the highest tech thing. But, we have two questions here. One of them is just a comment about from Laura Ammerman saying that she loves maps and that they're beautiful, which yes, indeed, they're really wonderful. And particularly,
Thank you.
I just think, that visiting a historical site, which, what's left of the history may not be all that much. It may be lumps of earth and, maybe somebody's rebuilt a stockade here and there, but that really gives you a chance to really see what it might have looked like and to put yourself in that place. So I absolutely agree. The other, George Gray's question was kind of like, what are you doing now? What are you working on at this point?
Unfortunately, there is no commission work happening at all, George. So I am just drawing and painting in my 18th century journal, developing a new impression to take to the field and historic sites when I do programming for them. Because I have already marched nearly 50 years ago through the entire bicentennial. And obviously I am 50 years older and am an old fart. I am not running around shooting guns at anybody anymore. I am representing myself as a half-pay British officer
Okay.
from the French and Indian War. So unless you are a Frenchman or an Indian, we were all on the same side at that time. And I am retired, and I am fishing with my 18th century fly rod and doing artwork. And that's where you're going to find me as they celebrate the 250th anniversary of the revolution. I am going to be on the sidelines, quietly cheering on my side.
Okay. Well, all right. So, yeah, boy, I am echoing. Hold on a second. That's better. No, it's still echoing. Well, then I think the time has come for me to pass this back to Todd, who will tell you once again about the Masterwork Foundation, and then you won't have to hear me echoing anymore. And thank you so much, John, for sharing your wonderful work with us. It's just been a real pleasure to get to know this work better.
Well, I appreciate you allowing me to use you as a vehicle to promote myself. So thank you so much,
You're
Joe, Todd.
Okay.
I'll just reiterate that and say, thanks for sharing your beautiful work, but also the stories behind it. I thought that was just as fascinating as the work itself. This interview will be posted on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter in the coming week. So you can all revisit it there. Also, I want to note that next week, we're going to have a panel with our community arts awardees for this year. That's going to be kind of fascinating. For more information about Masterwork Arts, including upcoming grant opportunities, visit masterworkarts.org or follow us on Facebook or Twitter. And I hope we all see you next week. Thank you again, John, and thank you all for attending.
Okay, yeah.
All right, thank you. Kath, I don't have any sound anymore.
Okay, now I should have sound.
Oh,
Okay.
I hear you, Joe.
Yeah, no, okay, we're done, and I will have edited all of this stuff off the end of it for there, but we would love to meet up with you if you're going to be up this way.
Well, let's make